There is a moment in almost every person's life when they look at somebody else and quietly say, he was lucky. Not successful because he worked harder. Not successful because he stayed longer. Not successful because he endured what nobody saw. Lucky, she got the opportunity because she was lucky. He met the right person because he was lucky. They were born into the right family. They had better circumstances. They knew somebody. They started at the right time. They had confidence because life had been kind to them. And maybe you have said it yourself. Maybe you have looked at somebody's success and thought, if I had their opportunities, I would be further ahead. Maybe you've watched somebody younger than you accomplish something you've been trying to accomplish for years. Maybe you've seen somebody build a business while you were still thinking about starting. Maybe you've watched somebody transform their body while you were promising yourself, once again, that Monday would be different. Maybe you've watched somebody speak with confidence while you struggled to say what you really believed. And somewhere inside you, a dangerous little sentence appeared. Maybe I'm just not lucky. Be careful with that sentence, because sometimes the most destructive lies are not the lies we tell other people. They are the lies we repeat quietly to ourselves until they become the architecture of our lives. And here's the uncomfortable question I want you to sit with tonight. What if the thing you have been calling bad luck is actually a pattern? What if what you call circumstances is sometimes the accumulated result of decisions you stopped noticing? What if the person you think was lucky simply became ready for an opportunity that you weren't prepared to recognize? And what if the greatest opportunity of your life isn't waiting for luck to find you? What if it is waiting for you to become the kind of person who can create opportunity wherever you stand? Don't answer that yet. Stay with me, because I want to take you somewhere deeper than positive thinking. I don't want to tell you to wake up tomorrow, smile at the mirror, say 3 affirmations, and pretend everything will work out. Life doesn't work that way. There are people who work hard and still lose. There are people who do everything right and still experience heartbreak. There are people who prepare and still get rejected. There are people who are disciplined and still face seasons when nothing seems to move. So this isn't about pretending that luck doesn't exist. Randomness exists, circumstances exist, timing exists, privilege exists, disadvantage exists. Unexpected events can change a person's life in a single afternoon. But there is something else that exists: preparation, character, courage, skill, attention, judgment, adaptability. And there is one force that can quietly multiply all of those things. Belief, not blind belief, not fantasy, not I deserve success simply because I want it. I'm talking about something much harder. The belief that says, even if I don't know how yet, I can learn. The belief that says, even if I failed yesterday, yesterday does not have to become my identity. The belief that says, I may not control what happened to me, but I am going to take responsibility for what happens next. That belief changes everything. But before you can build it, you have to understand why yours became weak in the first place. Because nobody wakes up one morning and decides, today I will become insecure. Nobody sits down at breakfast and says, I think I'll spend the next 10 years doubting myself. It happens quietly, a criticism here, a failure there, a comparison, a rejection, a parent who said, you're not good enough, a teacher who made you feel stupid, a friend who laughed when you tried, a business idea that failed, a relationship that ended, a job application that was rejected, a video that nobody watched, a dream you postponed, then another, and another. Until one day you aren't just experiencing failure, you're expecting it. That's different. Failure hurts. But expecting failure changes behavior. Because when you expect failure, you stop taking risks. When you stop taking risks, you stop collecting experiences. When you stop collecting experiences, You stop developing competence. When competence remains low, confidence remains low. Then low confidence becomes evidence for the original belief. And suddenly the mind says, see, I told you, you can't do it. That is how a prison is built without walls. Let me ask you something. How many opportunities have you rejected before they ever had a chance to reject you? How many conversations did you avoid? How many ideas did you keep hidden? How many applications did you never send? How many businesses did you never start? How many times did you stay silent because you were afraid somebody might judge you? How many times did you tell yourself, I'm waiting for the right time, when what you really meant was, I'm afraid to discover what happens if I try? That question is uncomfortable. Good. Sometimes discomfort is the beginning of honesty. And honesty is where transformation begins. There was once a young man who wanted to become a writer. He had notebooks filled with ideas. He would sit late at night and write, then he would read what he had written and criticize every sentence. This isn't good enough. Someone else has already said this. Who would listen to me? I need more experience. I need better equipment. I need to understand the market. I'll start when I know exactly what I'm doing. Years passed. He didn't fail. That's what makes the story interesting. He never failed because he never really began. Think about that. Sometimes the greatest tragedy isn't failing at your dream. Sometimes it is protecting yourself so carefully from failure that your dream never gets the opportunity to live. You can avoid rejection by never asking. You can avoid embarrassment by never speaking. You can avoid failure by never attempting. But there is a hidden price. You also avoid discovery. You avoid growth. You avoid competence. You avoid the possibility of becoming someone you have never been before, and eventually the mind becomes very clever. It gives you sophisticated reasons for cowardice. It calls fear being realistic. It calls procrastination research. It calls avoidance waiting for the right opportunity. It calls insecurity humility. It calls comfort peace. And sometimes it calls lack of action bad luck. But here's where the real problem begins. You cannot build confidence by thinking your way into confidence. You build it by giving yourself evidence. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you create evidence. Every time you do something difficult, when you don't feel like doing it, you create evidence. Every time you recover from failure, instead of collapsing into identity, you create evidence. Every time you speak when your voice shakes, you create evidence. Every time you finish what you started, you create evidence. And slowly, almost invisibly, your mind begins to say something different. Maybe I can trust myself. That's confidence, not arrogance, not pretending you're better than everyone, not walking into a room believing you're the smartest person there. Confidence is the quiet knowledge that whatever happens, you can meet the moment. That is a completely different kind of strength. Think about the difference. A person with fragile confidence needs everything to go well. A person with earned confidence doesn't. A fragile person says, I am confident because I know I will succeed. A stronger person says, I am confident because I know I can learn, adapt, recover, and continue even if I don't succeed immediately. That's the confidence you want, because luck cannot guarantee results. But self-trust can guarantee that you will keep participating in your own life, and that matters more than you realize. Imagine two people standing at the same starting line. One has talent but doesn't believe in himself. The other has average talent but believes he can improve. The talented person sees difficulty and thinks, maybe this proves I'm not meant for this. The growing person sees difficulty and thinks, this is information. One interprets struggle as a verdict. The other interprets struggle as feedback. Same obstacle, different meaning, different behavior, different future. This is why your mindset matters, not because thoughts magically create money, not because you can visualize a mansion and make one appear. Your thoughts matter because your interpretation of reality influences your behavior, and your behavior repeated over time produces consequences. You don't become successful because you thought successful thoughts for 5 minutes. You become different because your thinking changes what you repeatedly do. And what you repeatedly do changes who you become. That is the deeper principle. Your life is not only being shaped by the big decisions you make, it is being shaped by the tiny decisions you barely notice. What do you do when the alarm rings? What do you do when nobody is watching? What do you do when you're bored? What do you do after rejection? What do you do when someone criticizes you? What do you do when the first attempt fails? What do you do with an empty hour? What do you do with your attention? What do you do with your anger? What do you do with your money? What do you do with your promises? Those moments look small, but life is built out of small moments. A person doesn't suddenly become disciplined after 10 years. They become disciplined one decision at a time. A person doesn't suddenly become confident. They become confident after hundreds of moments in which they chose courage over avoidance. A person doesn't suddenly become successful. They accumulate skills, relationships, decisions, failures, lessons, habits, and opportunities until the outside world finally notices what was being built quietly. This is where people misunderstand luck. They see the harvest. They don't see the seasons. They see the successful business. They don't see the years of learning. They see the confident speaker. They don't see the first 100 times he stumbled. They see the athlete standing on the podium. They don't see the mornings when nobody applauded. They see the finished house. They don't see the foundation. And sometimes you look at somebody else's 10th year while judging your own 10th day. Of course you feel unlucky. You're comparing chapters, not stories. And maybe you have been doing this to yourself for years. You look sideways. You see somebody ahead. You feel behind. Then you lose motivation. Then you work less. Then you fall further behind. Then you compare again. The comparison creates the condition it complains about. That's the trap. You don't need to become somebody else. You need to become more capable than the version of you that existed yesterday. That sounds simple. But simple doesn't mean easy. Because now we reach something most motivational speeches don't talk about enough. You are going to have to disappoint your old identity. And your old identity will fight back. Your old identity knows your excuses. It knows your routines. It knows which emotions make you quit. It knows what kind of discomfort makes you reach for your phone. It knows how to convince you that tomorrow is better than today. You say you want change. Your habits say, not so fast. You say you want confidence. Your nervous system says, stay where it's safe. You say you want success. Your daily behavior says, give me comfort now. This is why transformation feels like conflict, because it is. There is a version of you that wants the future. And there is a version of you that wants the familiar, and the familiar is powerful, even when the familiar is painful. A person can remain in a miserable situation for years simply because the misery is familiar. They know how to live there. They know what tomorrow looks like. They know the excuses. They know the routine. But the moment they consider change, uncertainty appears. And uncertainty feels dangerous. So they choose known pain over unknown possibility. Maybe you've done that. Maybe you're doing it now. And here's something important. You don't have to hate yourself into changing. You don't have to wake up angry at the person you've been. That person was trying to survive with the tools they had. But survival habits can become success obstacles. At some point, you have to thank the old version of yourself for getting you this far. And then teach yourself a new way to live. That's growth. Not self-hatred. Expansion. There was a woman who spent years believing she wasn't intelligent. She had failed academically when she was younger. People around her reinforced the story. You're just not a school person. So she stopped trying. Years later, she found herself working a job she didn't hate but didn't love. She watched other people advance. She thought, they are smarter. One evening, something happened. Her employer needed someone to learn a new software system. Nobody volunteered. She almost stayed quiet. Then she raised her hand. She was terrified. The first week was miserable. She didn't understand the system. She made mistakes. She went home frustrated. But instead of saying, I'm not smart enough, she began asking a different question. What part don't I understand yet? That one word changed everything. Yet. Not understanding yet. Not knowing yet. Not being good yet. Not confident yet. The word yet opened a door that the word can't had locked. She studied. She practiced. She asked questions. Months passed. She became one of the strongest users of the system. Then she trained other employees. Then she moved into a better position. Her intelligence hadn't suddenly appeared. Her identity had changed. And once identity changed, behavior changed. Once behavior changed, results changed. Once results changed, other people called her successful. But success was not the beginning. It was the visible consequence of a private decision. I am willing to become someone different. That's what you have to understand. You are not stuck with the personality you have today. You are not permanently assigned your current level of courage. You are not locked into your current habits. You are not required to remain the person your past created. Your past explains you. It does not have to command you. And that distinction is enormous. Because there is a moment when responsibility becomes liberating. At first, responsibility sounds heavy. You mean it's my fault? No. That's not the point. Responsibility isn't always about blame. It is about power. If everything is somebody else's fault, then everything is somebody else's responsibility to fix. And if somebody else has to fix it, you are powerless. But when you say, I can't control everything, but I can influence what happens next, you regain power. Maybe you can't change your childhood. You can change what you repeat. Maybe you can't erase a rejection. You can change what you learn from it. Maybe you can't control what someone thinks about you. You can control whether their opinion becomes your identity. Maybe you can't control the economy. You can control what skills you develop. Maybe you can't control who gets the opportunity. You can control whether you're ready when your opportunity arrives. And that last part is where luck becomes interesting. Sometimes what people call luck is simply preparation meeting randomness. The opportunity appears. One person says, I wish I were ready. Another person says, I've been preparing for this. From the outside, the second person looks lucky. But the luck was only visible at the moment of opportunity. The preparation was invisible. That's why you must prepare before you feel ready, because opportunities rarely announce themselves 6 months in advance. They appear disguised as conversations, projects, problems, introductions, felchers. Unexpected responsibility, small chances, and if you have spent your years complaining that nobody gives you an opportunity, you may miss the fact that opportunities often arrive looking like work. They don't always look glamorous. Sometimes the opportunity is learning a skill nobody wants to learn. Sometimes it's taking responsibility nobody wants to take. Sometimes it's staying after everyone else leaves. Sometimes it's mastering something boring. Sometimes it's making the uncomfortable phone call. Sometimes it's rebuilding after something you thought would work didn't. And sometimes the opportunity is simply becoming the kind of person who can be trusted with a larger opportunity. This is why confidence cannot be separated from competence. You can repeat affirmations all day. But if you never practice, your mind knows deep down, you can't lie to yourself forever. Real confidence comes from evidence. So build evidence, small evidence today. Make one promise and keep it, not 20 promises. One. tomorrow, keep another, then another. Your brain begins to learn. My words mean something. That is powerful because one of the deepest forms of insecurity is broken self-trust. You say you're going to wake up early. You don't. You say you're going to exercise. You don't. You say you're going to stop wasting time. You don't. You say you're going to study. You don't. Eventually, the problem isn't just the habit. The problem becomes the relationship you have with your own word. You stop believing yourself. Then you wonder why you lack confidence. Confidence begins in private, before the audience, before the money, before the title, before the recognition. You must become someone whose own promises carry weight. And don't make the mistake of starting with an impossible promise. People often sabotage transformation by demanding perfection. They create a schedule so intense that they cannot sustain it. They decide to change everything on Monday. Wake up at 5, exercise 2 hours. Ride 50 pages. Build a business. Eat perfectly. Work 12 hours. Meditate, study, journal, no social media, no distractions. By Wednesday, they collapse. Then they say, I have no discipline. No. Maybe you designed a life that required a superhero and then blamed yourself for being human. Sustainable change is different. Make the behavior small enough that you can repeat it. Then protect repetition. Because repetition is where the magic hides. The first day doesn't transform you. The first week may not transform you. The first month may barely produce visible results. But something is happening underneath. You are teaching your nervous system. You are teaching your identity. You are teaching your environment. You are creating evidence. You are lowering the psychological cost of beginning. And then one day, something that used to require enormous effort becomes normal. That's when you realize the goal was never intensity. The goal was adaptation. The person who runs 10 miles once is impressive. The person who walks every day for 10 years has built something more important. A relationship with consistency. And consistency is not glamorous. That's why most people don't respect it enough. They want breakthroughs. Life is usually built through repetitions. One conversation, one page, one workout, one saved dollar, one difficult decision. 1 hour of focused work, one apology, one boundary. 1 day of restraint, one more attempt, one more lesson, and then another. This is the compound effect. People hear compound effect and think money. But money is only one example. Confidence compounds. So does insecurity. Knowledge compounds, so does ignorance. Health compounds, so does neglect. Trust compounds, so does betrayal. Skill compounds, so does distraction. Courage compounds. So does avoidance. Your life is always compounding something. The question isn't whether you are compounding. The question is what you are compounding. Let that question sit with you. What are you practicing every day? Because practice doesn't only build skills. It builds identity. If you practice quitting, you become familiar with quitting. If you practice keeping promises, you become familiar with integrity. If you practice distraction, distraction becomes normal. If you practice focus, focus becomes easier. If you practice complaining, your brain becomes skilled at finding evidence for why life is unfair. If you practice gratitude, you begin noticing resources you previously ignored. If you practice courage, fear doesn't necessarily disappear. But your relationship with fear changes. And that may be one of the most important things you ever learn. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is refusing to let fear make every decision. You can be afraid and apply, afraid and speak, afraid and start, afraid and apologize, afraid and leave, afraid and stay, afraid and learn, afraid and try again. You don't need to wait until you feel fearless. Because if you wait for fear to disappear, you may wait your entire life. The person who succeeds isn't necessarily the person who feels less fear. Often it's the person who has learned to move while carrying it. And that changes the meaning of confidence. Confidence is not saying, nothing bad can happen. Confidence says, something difficult may happen, and I will deal with it. Now think about the future, not the fantasy future, the real one. Imagine 12 months passing. Imagine nothing changes. Same habits, same distractions, same excuses, same people influencing you, same amount of time lost on your phone, same financial decisions, same hesitation, same promises made and broken, same comparison, same fear. Where are you? Don't look away from that image, because sometimes motivation comes from desire, but sometimes it comes from realizing what continuation costs. Now imagine another 12 months. Not perfect. You still fail. You still have bad days. You still get rejected. But you begin keeping promises. You protect your attention. You learn a valuable skill. You exercise consistently. You save something. You read. You practice. You stop chasing everybody's approval. You begin saying no. You stop explaining yourself to people who don't understand your direction. You become slightly more courageous, slightly more disciplined, slightly more capable. Where are you now? The difference may not look dramatic on Tuesday. But after a year, after 3 years, after 5, that is where small choices become visible. And here's the part people don't like. You are going to live those years anyway. Time doesn't ask whether you're ready. It moves. You can use it. You can waste it. But you cannot store it. There is no warehouse where you can put today's 24 hours and retrieve them later. That hour you wasted is gone. That conversation you avoided is part of history. That opportunity you ignored becomes a story. And the danger is that regret rarely arrives while you're making the decision. Regret arrives later, years later. When you finally understand what that season was worth, a person can tolerate wasting a day. But when they see 20 years of days stacked behind them, the emotional weight becomes different. This is why you must stop asking only, what feels good right now? Ask, what will this choice teach me to become? Because every choice is training. You're training for your future. If you choose comfort every time discomfort appears, you're training avoidance. If you choose action despite discomfort, you're training courage. If you choose the phone every time boredom appears, you're training distraction. If you choose to sit with the difficulty, you're training attention. If you choose excuses after mistakes, you're training helplessness. If you choose reflection, you're training responsibility. You are always becoming, even when you think you're standing still. That's why doing nothing is not always neutral. Time keeps moving, and your habits keep shaping you. There was a man who once said, I don't understand how my life got this far off track. His life hadn't collapsed in one dramatic event. That would have been easier to identify. It happened through small compromises. He stopped exercising for a few weeks. He started spending more because he was stressed. He stopped learning because he was tired. He ignored a relationship because he assumed there would always be time. He began sleeping later. He became dependent on distraction. He stopped challenging himself. None of those decisions felt like the destruction of a future. Each one felt small. That's the danger of small things. Then one day he looked around and realized his life had become the sum of decisions he never considered important. And the reverse is also true. A great life is often the sum of small decisions nobody applauded. The extra hour, the saved money, the difficult conversation, the book, the workout, the application, the second attempt, the skill, the boundary, the morning when you didn't feel like it, the evening when you chose preparation instead of entertainment. Those choices don't make headlines, but they build lives. And now I want to go deeper, because you might be thinking, fine, I understand. I need to act. But action is not always the hardest part. Sometimes the hardest part is changing what you believe you deserve. Some people sabotage opportunities because success threatens their identity. They say they want more money, But deep down, they associate wealth with greed. They say they want to be visible, but deep down, they fear judgment. They say they want leadership, but they don't want responsibility. They say they want love, but they fear vulnerability. They say they want freedom, but they resist structure. They say they want success, but they secretly believe successful people are somehow different from them. So they approach their dream with one foot on the accelerator and one foot on the brake. They move forward, then sabotage, forward, then sabotage, and they wonder why nothing changes. You have to examine the beliefs underneath your behavior. Ask yourself, what do I believe about people who succeed? What do I believe about money? What do I believe about failure? What do I believe about my intelligence? What do I believe about my ability to learn? What do I believe about my right to take up space? What do I believe will happen if I become more successful than the people around me? That last question can reveal something, because sometimes people are afraid not of failure, but of what success will require them to leave behind. If you grow, some relationships may change. If you become disciplined, some friends may tease you. If you stop complaining, some conversations may become boring. If you become ambitious, people may call you arrogant. If you start setting boundaries, people who benefited from your lack of boundaries may become uncomfortable. Growth can be lonely before it becomes attractive. And that's another reason people choose the familiar. They would rather remain accepted than become transformed. But you must decide. Do you want applause from people who don't understand your potential? Or do you want a life that respects the person you could become? I'm not telling you to abandon everyone. I'm telling you to understand influence. Your environment is constantly voting on who you become. Every conversation, every screen, every friend, every habit, every room, every message, every piece of content, your attention is being trained. And attention is one of the most valuable resources you possess. Where attention goes, energy follows. Where energy goes, behavior follows. Where behavior repeats, identity forms. And identity influences your future. So if you spend hours consuming people who make you feel inadequate, don't be surprised when confidence weakens. If you spend hours watching distractions, don't be surprised when focus becomes difficult. If you constantly consume outrage, don't be surprised when peace becomes difficult. If you constantly compare your life to edited versions of other people's lives, don't be surprised when gratitude disappears. Your mind is not a trash can. You cannot throw anything into it and expect nothing to happen. Be selective. Not because you need to live in a bubble, but because you are building something. And builders protect their materials. Now, here's another layer. You can change your environment and still carry the old you into the new environment. You can delete the apps, move, cities, champion jobs, buy a planner, wake up early. But if your internal identity remains unchanged, the old patterns may return. That's why transformation is internal first. The environment helps. But eventually you have to face yourself, the excuses, the fears, the need for approval, the addiction to comfort, the habit of quitting, the tendency to compare, the belief that you need motivation before action. You have to meet those things honestly, not with shame, with curiosity. Ask, why do I keep doing this? Not what's wrong with me. There's a difference. The first question creates investigation. The second creates identity. And if you constantly tell yourself something is wrong with you, you may begin defending that identity. But if you ask why, you can find the mechanism. Maybe you procrastinate because the task is vague. Make it specific. Maybe you procrastinate because you're afraid the result won't be good enough. Lower the starting standard. Maybe you get distracted because your environment is designed for distraction. Change the environment. Maybe you quit because your goals are too dependent on emotional excitement. Deprecate routines. Maybe you compare because you don't have measurable personal standards. Define your own scoreboard. Pop psychology becomes useful when it becomes practical. And practical wisdom begins when you stop asking, how do I feel? And start asking, what does the situation require? There will be days when you don't feel motivated. The work still exists. There will be days when you doubt yourself. The commitment still exists. There will be days when nobody believes in you. The responsibility still exists. There will be days when your results are invisible. The process still exists. You cannot make your emotions the CEO of your life. Emotions are information. They are not always instructions. Fear says, this is dangerous. Maybe. Or maybe it's unfamiliar. Anger says, something matters. Listen. But don't surrender control. Sadness says, something hurts. Honor it. But don't let pain write your entire future. Excitement says, this is wonderful. Enjoy it. But don't build a strategy entirely around excitement. Maturity is learning to feel without becoming controlled by every feeling. And that is another form of confidence. Emotional self-command, not emotional suppression, self-command. The ability to say, I am angry, but I will choose my response. I am afraid, but I will still take the next step. I am tired, but I will decide what truly matters. I am disappointed, but I will learn. I am uncertain, but I will gather information. I am discouraged, but I will not make a permanent decision based on a temporary emotion. That is strength. And sometimes the strongest thing you can do is continue quietly. Not dramatically, quietly. No announcement, no speech, no need for everybody to know. Just continue, because there will be seasons when your progress is invisible. You will work and see little. You will practice and still feel mediocre. You will save and the amount will look small. You will exercise and the mirror won't change quickly. You will learn and still feel ignorant. You will create and nobody will respond. That is where many people quit. Not because the process stopped working, because the evidence arrived too slowly for their patience. But roots grow before trees become visible. Foundations are built before buildings rise. And the invisible season is not necessarily a wasted season. Sometimes it is the season that determines whether the visible success can survive. Imagine giving someone a huge opportunity before they have developed the character to handle it. The opportunity can destroy them. Money without financial wisdom, attention without emotional stability, authority without humility, success without discipline, Wittgenstein without identity. Growth increases the consequences of your habits. That's why you shouldn't only ask for bigger opportunities. Ask to become capable of carrying them. Become the person who can handle what you're asking life to give you, because maybe the delay isn't punishment. Maybe it's preparation. I'm not saying every delay has a magical reason. Sometimes things are simply unfair, but you can still use the delay. You can still become stronger inside it. And that is where your relationship with luck changes. Instead of asking, why didn't I get the opportunity? You begin asking, what can I build while I'm waiting? That's a different person. That person is dangerous to mediocrity because they don't need perfect circumstances to improve. They can improve in a small room. They can learn with limited resources. They can practice without applause. They can save a small amount. They can read one page. They can make one call. They can improve one skill. They can begin. And beginning changes the psychological landscape because before action, your dream is imagination. After action, it becomes evidence. Maybe small evidence, but evidence. Then you can adjust. And adjustment is another skill. You don't need to know the entire road. You need enough courage to travel the next section. Think about driving at night. Your headlights don't show you the entire highway. They show you a limited distance. But you can still travel hundreds of miles. You don't need total certainty. You need enough visibility for the next move. People often say, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with my life. Sometimes the answer isn't hidden in a mystical revelation. Sometimes you discover direction by moving, try something. Learn, observe, deflect, adjust, try again. Clarity often follows action, not always, but often. And if you wait for perfect clarity, you may remain stationary for years. The person who starts imperfectly learns more than the person who plans perfectly. This doesn't mean act recklessly. It means don't confuse uncertainty with impossibility. Now I want you to remember a failure. A real one, not something small. Think about the thing that still bothers you. The opportunity you lost, the relationship you damaged, the business that failed. The exam you didn't pass, the decision you regret, the moment you embarrassed yourself, the dream you abandoned. Bring it to mind. Now ask yourself something different. What did that experience teach me about myself? Not what did it prove about me? What did it teach me? That's the shift. Because the meaning you assign to failure determines whether it becomes a scar or a teacher. Failure can say you are worthless, or it can say your strategy needs improvement. Those are not the same message. One attacks identity. The other improves behavior. You need to learn the difference. A failed business does not necessarily mean you are a failure. A rejected application does not necessarily mean you are incapable. A bad relationship does not necessarily mean you are unlovable. A mistake does not necessarily mean you are stupid. A slow beginning does not necessarily mean you have no potential. Sometimes it means you need another approach. And sometimes it means you need more time. The growth mindset is not believing you can accomplish anything instantly. It is believing your current level is not the final definition of your capacity. That's more grounded. You don't need to tell yourself, I can do anything. Tell yourself, I can become better. I can learn. I can adapt. I can improve my odds. I can ask for help. I can practice. I can recover. Those beliefs are powerful because they create action. And action creates evidence. Evidence creates confidence. Confidence encourages bigger action. Bigger action creates new experiences. New experiences produce new skills. And suddenly, the person who once thought they were unlucky becomes the person others describe as fortunate. Funny, isn't it? People see the outcome. They don't see the internal revolution. They say, you got lucky. And maybe you smile because you know. You remember the nights. You remember the rejection. You remember the days nobody cared. You remember when you almost quit. You remember the tiny decisions. You remember the moment you stopped asking for permission. You remember when you realized that confidence wasn't something somebody gives you. It was something you built, brick by brick, decision by decision, and now we reach something even deeper. There is a difference between believing in yourself and needing to believe that you will win. You don't need the second. You need the first. If your confidence depends on guaranteed victory, your confidence will always be fragile. But if your confidence is based on your ability to respond, then uncertainty becomes less terrifying. You can enter the room without knowing exactly how the conversation will go. You can start the business without knowing exactly what will happen. You can publish the work without knowing how people will react. You can ask the question without knowing the answer because your confidence isn't, I know the future. It's, I trust myself to participate in the future. That is powerful. And it makes you freer. You stop needing certainty before movement. You stop needing everyone to approve. You stop needing every attempt to succeed. You stop needing luck to guarantee the outcome. You become willing to play the game. And life rewards participation. Not always immediately. Not always fairly. But participation creates possibility. A person sitting on the sidelines cannot score. They may have reasons. They may have injuries. They may have fears. But eventually there comes a moment when you have to decide whether you are going to keep explaining why you haven't entered the arena or step into it. And stepping into it doesn't mean you won't get hurt. Someone will criticize you. Someone will misunderstand you. Someone will reject you. Something will fail. You will embarrass yourself. You will make bad decisions. You will trust the wrong person. You will waste time. You will discover weaknesses. That's part of becoming capable. You don't become strong by designing a life where nothing challenges you. You become strong by developing the capacity to meet challenges. That's why struggle can be useful, not because suffering is automatically good. It isn't. But difficulty can reveal what comfort hides. It reveals your habits, your beliefs, your emotional control, your preparation, your relationships, your priorities, and sometimes your potential. A person may never know how strong they are until circumstances demand strength. But you don't have to wait for catastrophe. You can voluntarily practice difficulty. Wake up when you said you would. Finish the task, have the conversation, take the walk, study when you would rather scroll, save when you want to spend, say no when you want approval. Practice when nobody is watching. These are small acts of voluntary discomfort. They teach you something. I can choose. And the ability to choose is freedom, not unlimited freedom. Real freedom, the freedom to not obey every impulse, the freedom to pause, the freedom to decide, the freedom to say, this feeling is here, but I don't have to become it. And the more you practice that freedom, the stronger your internal world becomes. Now think about the person you will be 5 years from now. That person is being created by the person you are today. Not completely. Life will surprise you. Circumstances will change. You will encounter people you haven't met. You will discover things you cannot imagine today. But your habits are voting. Your attention is voting. Your standards are voting. Your courage is voting. Your excuses are voting. Every day is an election for your future identity, and you don't need to win every day. You need to stop losing the same election every day. That's a different challenge. Maybe you don't need a perfect life. Maybe you need one fewer excuse, one more promise kept, one more hour protected, one more uncomfortable conversation, one more attempt, one more page, one more rejection survived, one more day without abandoning yourself. That's how people change, not through one giant heroic moment, through accumulated self-respect. And self-respect is not telling yourself you're amazing. Self-respect is behaving in ways that make you trust yourself. You say you'll do something, then you do it. You make a mistake, then you own it. You hurt someone, then you apologize. You fail, then you learn. You become tired. Then you rest intentionally instead of escaping endlessly. You want something, then you accept the price. That's maturity. And success without maturity can become a trap, because if you get everything you want without becoming stronger internally, you may lose it. So don't chase only outcomes. Build capacity. Build character. Build emotional resilience. Build skills. Build judgment. Build patience. Build the ability to delay gratification. Build the ability to work without applause. Build the ability to hear criticism without collapsing. Build the ability to hear praise without becoming dependent on it. Build the ability to keep going when the emotional high disappears. That is the kind of person who no longer needs luck to feel safe. They still appreciate good fortune. Of course, if something good happens unexpectedly, be grateful. If someone opens a door, walk through it. If timing favors you, use it. But never make luck your identity. Because if luck is responsible for your success, then bad luck becomes responsible for your failure. And you give away your power in both directions. You don't need to deny randomness. You need to refuse helplessness. That's the distinction. You can say, some things are outside my control, and then immediately ask, what is inside it? That question can save years of your life. You can't control whether someone likes your work. You can control whether you improve it. You can't control whether the first investor says yes. You can control how many conversations you have. You can't control whether someone leaves. You can control how you rebuild. You can't control yesterday. You can control what you practice today. You can't control the starting point. You can influence the direction. And direction matters. A small change in direction, repeated long enough, can take you to a completely different destination. Think about a plane. A tiny deviation from the intended direction doesn't seem dramatic at takeoff. But thousands of miles later, the destination can be completely different. Your life works similarly. 1 degree, 1 habit, 1 belief, 1 environment, 1 decision. It doesn't feel like much today, but keep it for years. And the distance becomes enormous. That should give you hope, because if small negative choices can compound into a life you don't want, small positive choices can compound into a life you once thought was impossible. You don't need to transform everything tonight. You need to change the direction, then protect it. There will be setbacks. Expect them. Don't build a plan that assumes you will never struggle. Build a plan that includes recovery. Miss a day, return, make a mistake, repair, lose focus, refocus. Get rejected. Learn. Feel afraid? Breathe and move. Fall? Get up. Not because getting up is always easy, because staying down has consequences too. And sometimes you will need to get up without inspiration. This is where the romantic version of success disappears. There will be days when the dream doesn't feel exciting. There will be days when you question everything. There will be days when you wonder whether anyone will ever notice. There will be days when your progress seems absurdly slow. Those days are not proof that the dream is wrong. They are part of the price. And if you only continue when you feel inspired, your life will be controlled by emotion. Build systems for the days when motivation disappears. That's why routines matter. A routine reduces negotiation. If every morning you ask yourself, do I feel like working today? You've already opened a debate. But if your morning contains a simple sequence you follow, you reduce the number of decisions required. This isn't about becoming a robot. It's about protecting your goals from your moods. And the same principle applies to confidence. Don't wait until you feel confident to act. Act in small ways that create confidence. Speak 1 sentence. Ask 1 question. Take 1 step. Start 1 application. Publish 1 piece of work. Make 1 difficult call. Every action tells your brain, we do this now. Eventually the behavior becomes familiar. And familiar courage is different from forced courage. You become the kind of person who acts. Then you no longer need a motivational speech every morning. You still appreciate inspiration, but you are no longer dependent on it. That's freedom. And perhaps that is what you were really looking for all along. Not luck, not motivation, not somebody coming to rescue you. Freedom. The freedom to trust yourself, the freedom to build, the freedom to choose, the freedom to fail without becoming failure, the freedom to change your mind, the freedom to learn, the freedom to begin again. Now imagine that you had known this 10 years ago. Imagine you had understood earlier that confidence was built, not granted. Imagine you had understood that small choices compound. Imagine you had understood that your environment matters. Imagine you had understood that fear doesn't have to disappear. Imagine you had understood that you didn't need to be extraordinary to begin. Would your life be different? Maybe. But don't use that question to punish yourself. Use it to create urgency, because there is another 10 years coming. And you have a choice about what those years will compound into. 5 years from now, you will have lived 5 more years. The only question is, who will have lived them? The version of you that keeps waiting, or the version that begins becoming? And please understand something. Becoming does not mean becoming perfect. It means becoming more intentional, more awake, more responsible, more courageous, more capable, more honest, more disciplined, more patient. more selective with attention, more willing to learn, you don't have to become a different species. You have to stop abandoning yourself. That's what many people do. They abandon themselves after one bad result. They abandon themselves after criticism. They abandon themselves when progress is slow. They abandon themselves because someone else didn't believe in them. But you cannot build a great life while constantly leaving yourself during difficult seasons. Stay with the process. Stay with the lesson. Stay with the work. Stay long enough to see what consistency can do, not blindly, not stubbornly, intelligently. Adjust when necessary. Chance strategies, step advice, study, experiment. But don't confuse changing the method with abandoning the mission. That is another form of wisdom. Sometimes persistence means continuing. Sometimes persistence means changing how you continue. A tree grows around obstacles. It doesn't always destroy them. It finds another direction. You can do the same. If one door closes, don't spend your entire life arguing with the door. Look around, learn, adapt, build another entrance. And maybe the path you thought was a detour becomes the path that develops the exact skills you later need. That's why you should stop demanding that life makes sense immediately. Some lessons take years to understand. Some failures only reveal their value later. Some endings create space. Some delays build patience. Some rejections force you to improve. Again, I'm not saying every painful event was secretly designed for you. Life is more complicated than that. I'm saying you have the power to decide what you will build from what happened. And that is enough. Now let's talk about one of the greatest enemies of self-belief. Comparison can make a person feel poor while standing in abundance. It can make a talented person feel useless. It can make progress feel like failure. You look at someone else's highlight and compare it to your behind the scenes. You see their result. You don't see their debt. You see their confidence. You don't see their anxiety. You see their success. You don't see their sacrifices. You see their 10 years. You compare it to your 2, and then you call yourself unlucky. Stop. You need a personal scoreboard. Measure yourself against your previous self. Are you more capable, more disciplined, more financially responsible, more emotionally stable, more skilled, more courageous, more focused, more honest, more consistent? That's the comparison that produces growth. Not because other people's success doesn't matter. It can inspire you. Study it. Learn from it. But don't worship it. Someone else's success is evidence that something is possible. It is not evidence that you are incapable. And sometimes the person you envy can become your teacher if you stop envying long enough to study. Ask, what do they do consistently? What skill did they develop? What sacrifices did they make? What systems do they use? What mistakes did they survive? What can I learn? That changes envy into education, and education into action. Now we are getting closer to something profound. You don't need to believe you are destined for greatness. You need to believe you are responsible for development. Destiny is too passive. Development is active. You don't sit around asking, am I meant to succeed? You ask, what can I improve? That's a better question, because improvement gives you something to do, and action gives you agency. You can improve communication. You can improve fitness. You can improve financial habits. You can improve emotional control. You can improve technical skills. You can improve relationships. You can improve your thinking. You can improve your environment. You can improve your ability to focus. And every improvement changes the odds. That is what people miss when they talk about luck. You cannot control every outcome, but you can improve your probabilities. Preparation improves probability. Skill improves probability. Relationships improve probability. Deference improves probability. Good judgment improves probability. Consistency improves probability. You are not guaranteed success. You are becoming harder to stop. That is different. And maybe that's the kind of confidence you need. Not certainty. Resilience, not I will definitely win, but I will become better at playing. I will become harder to discourage. I will become more capable. I will keep learning. I will keep adjusting. I will keep showing up. That is a mindset that can survive reality, and reality is what you need to prepare for. Because the world will not always reward you immediately. Sometimes you will do good work, and someone else gets the credit. Sometimes you will be prepared, and the opportunity goes to somebody else. Sometimes you will do everything you can and still lose. What then? That's the question, because if your entire identity depends on winning, losing will destroy you. But if your identity is built around becoming, losing can teach you. This doesn't mean you enjoy losing. You don't. You can be disappointed. You can grieve. You can be angry. You can need time. Strength doesn't mean pretending pain doesn't hurt. Strength means pain doesn't get permanent authority over your future. That's important. Give yourself permission to hurt. Then give yourself permission to move. There are people who have been waiting for an apology that may never come, waiting for recognition, waiting for someone to understand, waiting for the perfect opportunity, waiting for confidence, waiting for the fear to disappear, waiting for the past to become different. And while they wait, life keeps moving. At some point, you have to decide what you will do with the life that remains, not the life you should have had, the life you have. That is where power begins, not in denial. Acceptance does not mean approval. It means acknowledging reality clearly enough to act within it. This happened. I'm here. This is what I have. What can I do next? That's a powerful sequence. And sometimes the next step is very small. So small that your ego doesn't respect it. But take it anyway, because your future does not need a dramatic announcement. It needs a direction, one honest decision, then another one, disciplined morning, then another one, courageous conversation, then another one, skill practiced, then another, and eventually the person you were waiting to become begins to appear, not all at once, gradually. You start noticing that you react differently, you recover faster, you don't need as much approval, you don't panic at every setback, you don't need motivation for every task. You begin trusting your process. You begin making decisions based on values instead of impulses. And one day you realize something: the external world may not have changed as much as you thought. You changed. And because you changed, your experience of the world changed. The same problem that once terrified you now looks manageable. The same rejection that once destroyed you now becomes information. The same room that once intimidated you now becomes an opportunity to contribute. The same uncertainty that once froze you now becomes something you can navigate. That's growth, not becoming fearless, becoming capable. And capable people don't wait for luck. They look for leverage, they look for lessons, they look for patterns, they look for opportunities, they look for what can be improved. They ask better questions, and better questions create better decisions. So ask yourself tonight, what am I calling luck that I could influence? What am I calling personality that is actually a habit? What am I calling inability that is actually lack of practice? What am I calling bad timing that may simply require patience? What am I calling failure that may be feedback? What am I calling fear that may be unfamiliarity? What am I calling comfort that may actually be avoidance? And perhaps the most important question, what would change if I stopped waiting to feel ready? Don't answer quickly. Sit with it. Because your life may be waiting on that answer. There is a version of you that will never exist unless you act. You can imagine him. You can imagine her. Stronger, calmer, more skilled, more confident, more financially responsible, more disciplined, more selective, more courageous. But imagination isn't enough. That person has to be built, and building requires material. Your material is today, this hour, this choice, this conversation, this page, this practice, this refusal, this beginning. You don't build your future with tomorrow. You build it with what you repeatedly do today. And tomorrow keeps becoming today. That's the strange thing about time. We're always waiting for it. Waiting for Monday. Waiting for next month. Waiting for January. Waiting for the right year. Waiting for the right opportunity. But eventually we realized that the future was never a place we could enter. It was simply a series of toe days. And every today was asking the same question, what will you do with me? You don't need to answer perfectly, but answer intentionally. Because if you don't decide how to use your attention, something else will. If you don't decide what matters, somebody else will tell you. If you don't decide what standards you live by, your environment will decide. If you don't decide what you are becoming, your habits will decide. And habits are patient. They don't argue, they simply repeat. That's why small choices are so powerful. A 5-minute decision can become a 5-year identity. A small compromise can become a pattern. A small act of courage can become confidence. A small act of discipline can become freedom. A small act of learning can become expertise. A small act of saving can become financial stability. A small act of kindness can become a relationship. A small act of honesty can rebuild trust. Never underestimate small beginnings, but don't romanticize them either. Small beginnings must be repeated. That's the part people want to skip. They want the seed and the harvest without the seasons. They want the first workout and the body transformation, the first dollar and financial freedom, the first video and the audience, the first book and expertise. The first courageous act and permanent confidence. It doesn't work that way. The beginning is not supposed to look impressive. It is supposed to be repeated. And repetition creates transformation. That's why your job isn't to impress yourself today. Your job is to become trustworthy to yourself over time. Do the work, then do it again. Learn, then apply. Fail, then adjust. Ret, then return. That rhythm is powerful because real growth isn't a straight line. It has seasons, expansion, plateaus, setbacks, recovery, acceleration, uncertainty. And sometimes the plateau is preparing you for the next level. You may feel like nothing is happening because the results are not visible. But ask yourself, what is becoming easier? What are you understanding now that you didn't understand before? What would the old version of you have done in this situation? And what did you do instead? Those are signs. Don't only measure outcomes. Measure capacity, because sometimes the first sign of success isn't getting more. It's becoming able to handle more. More pressure, more responsibility, more uncertainty, more rejection, more complexity, more opportunity, more success. And that last one matters. Some people are prepared to survive failure, but not success. Success can expose weaknesses too. It can make you complacent. It can make you arrogant. It can make you dependent on praise. It can make you stop learning. So even when things begin working, stay teachable. Don't become intoxicated by your own progress. Stay curious. Because the moment you think you have nothing left to learn is often the moment your growth begins to slow. Humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's recognizing that there is always more to understand. And that mindset keeps you moving. Now imagine someone watching your life from the future. Imagine your older self sitting across from you, not judging, just watching. What would they tell you? Would they say, you should have taken more risks? Would they say, you spent too much time worrying about what strangers thought? Would they say, you waited too long? Would they say, you already knew what you needed to do? Would they say, you should have believed in yourself sooner? Or would they say, thank you for starting? That's a powerful question. Because someday your future self will live with the consequences of today's decisions. And you don't want to meet that person with regret. You want to meet them with evidence. Evidence that you tried. Evidence that you learned. Evidence that you became stronger. Evidence that you stopped blaming luck for everything. Evidence that you took responsibility for what you could control. Evidence that you didn't need perfect circumstances to begin. Evidence that you became the person you once needed. And maybe you are not where you want to be. That's okay. But don't confuse not there yet with not going there. Those are completely different statements. You can be behind and still moving forward. You can be uncertain and still making progress. You can be afraid and still be courageous. You can be inexperienced and still begin. You can be rejected and still be worthy. You can be tired and still choose what matters. You can fail and still learn. You can start late and still build something meaningful. The calendar doesn't care about your excuses, but it also doesn't care about your regrets. It simply moves. So move with it. Not frantically. Intentionally. And if you have to start over. There is no shame in rebuilding. A rebuilt life can be stronger because now you know what the first version didn't. You know what distraction costs. You know what bad decisions feel like. You know what false confidence looks like. You know what relationships drain you. You know what excuses sound like. You know how quickly years can pass. Use that knowledge. Wisdom is expensive. Don't waste what your pain taught you. And this brings us to something deeper than confidence. Meaning, because eventually you have to ask, why do I want success? If the answer is only money, the pursuit may become empty. If the answer is only status, approval becomes addictive. If the answer is only proving people wrong, your enemies become your motivation. And that gives them too much power. You need something deeper. What kind of person do you want to become? Who benefits if you become disciplined? Who benefits if you become emotionally stable? Who benefits if you become financially responsible? Who benefits if you develop your gifts? Who benefits if you become courageous? Maybe your family. Maybe your community. Maybe people you haven't met yet. Maybe the younger person who is watching you. Purpose changes the nature of effort. When the work becomes connected to something larger than ego, discomfort becomes easier to interpret. You are not simply waking up early. You are becoming dependable. You are not simply studying. You are expanding your capacity to contribute. You are not simply saving money. You are buying future options. You are not simply exercising. You are caring for the body that carries your mission. You are not simply learning to speak. You are becoming capable of communicating ideas that may help someone, meaning makes discipline less mechanical. And perhaps that's why some people endure what others cannot. They have a reason. A reason can pull you through seasons when motivation cannot. But don't wait for a grand purpose to begin. Purpose can develop as you move off, doctricate, learn help. Observe what gives you energy. Notice what problems you care about. Notice what people ask you for help with. Notice where your skills intersect with real needs. Purpose is not always discovered in one magical moment. Sometimes it is constructed. And construction takes time. Which brings us back to luck. You cannot control everything. You never will. But you can become more prepared, more courageous, more capable, more attentive, more resilient. And when opportunity and preparation meet, people may call it luck. Let them. You don't need to argue. You need to keep building because there will be another opportunity and another and another. But only if you are still participating. That's the part people underestimate. The percentage increases exposure to possibility. If you quit after 3 attempts, you will never know what attempt 4 could have produced. If you stop publishing because the first 10 pieces were ignored, you never discover what the 11th might become. If you stop applying because of rejection, you remove yourself from future possibilities. If you stop meeting people because one relationship hurt you, you prevent future relationships from existing. You cannot guarantee the outcome, but you can increase the number of chances you give life to surprise you. That is intelligent persistence, not blind repetition. More attempts, better learning. Better strategy, more exposure. And sometimes the thing you call luck is simply the result of being present long enough for something unexpected to happen. Stay in the game, learn the game, improve your game. And don't let one bad season convince you that the entire story is over. Because you don't know what's around the next corner. You don't know who you will meet. You don't know what skill will change your life. You don't know what idea will emerge. You don't know what failure will redirect you. You don't know what opportunity is currently forming beyond your vision. You don't know. And that uncertainty can be frightening, but it can also be beautiful. Because if you don't know, possibility still exists. The future is not written in the detail you fear. There is room for growth. Room for mistakes. Room for reinvention. Room for courage. Room for surprise. And that is why I don't want you to leave this conversation believing that you have to control everything. You don't. I want you to leave understanding that you can participate, you can influence, you can prepare, you can choose, you can learn, you can recover, you can build, and perhaps that is enough to change the direction of your life. Because the person who believes everything depends on luck waits. The person who believes everything depends on effort may become bitter when effort doesn't immediately produce results, but the mature person understands the combination. Effort matters. Circumstances matter. Timing matters. Relationships matter. Chance matters. And your response matters. You cannot control the entire equation, but you are responsible for your part of it. And your part is bigger than you think. You control whether you prepare, whether you learn, whether you practice, whether you recover, whether you protect your attention, whether you keep your word, whether you seek better influences, whether you continue, whether you adjust, whether you become more capable. That's your territory. Own it, not with arrogance, with gratitude, because responsibility is a privilege. It means your actions matter. It means your choices matter. It means your future isn't completely predetermined. And if you have made mistakes, that doesn't remove your power. It gives you information. Use it. If you've wasted years, don't waste another year mourning the years. If you've been inconsistent, become consistent now. If you've been afraid, practice courage now. If you've been distracted, protect your attention now. If you've been waiting, take one step now, not because one step solves your life, because one step changes your relationship with movement. Then take another and another, until one day you look backward and realize the distance between who you were and who you became was created by choices that once looked almost insignificant. That is the mystery. Transformation rarely feels dramatic while it's happening. It often feels ordinary. You are simply doing today's work, then tomorrow's, then next week's, then next month's. And while you're focused on the next step, your identity is changing behind the scenes. One day you notice, you don't panic like you used to. You don't quit as quickly. You don't need everyone to agree. You can sit with uncertainty. You can handle criticism. You can say no. You can say yes. You can begin. You can begin again. And that is when confidence becomes quiet. It no longer needs to announce itself. You don't have to tell everybody you're confident. Your behavior tells them. You don't have to tell everybody you're disciplined. Your consistency tells them. You don't have to tell everybody you're growing. Your decisions tell them. You don't have to tell everybody you believe in yourself. Your willingness to keep showing up tells them. And perhaps most importantly, it tells you. That's the voice you have to rebuild, the voice inside that says, keep going. Not because success is guaranteed, because you're not finished becoming. And maybe there is something you have been waiting to hear from somebody else. Maybe you have been waiting for someone to tell you you are capable. Maybe nobody has. Maybe you've been waiting for permission. Maybe nobody will give it. Then listen carefully. You don't need universal permission to develop yourself. You don't need everyone to understand. You don't need everyone to believe. You need enough courage to begin believing through action, because belief without action is fantasy. Action without belief can become mechanical. But belief and action together create momentum. And momentum is powerful. Once you have momentum, the challenge becomes protecting it, protecting your mornings, protecting your attention, protecting your standards, protecting your health, protecting your relationships, protecting your learning, protecting the identity you're building, not from the world entirely, but from the little things that slowly pull you backward. The unnecessary argument, the endless scrolling, the constant comparison, the late night distraction, the promise you keep postponing, the person you keep trying to impress, the excuse you keep rehearsing. Small leaks sink ships, and small leaks can sink futures too. You don't need to eliminate every weakness tonight, but identify the leak, then close it, one, then another, and replace it with something constructive. Don't simply remove .deps. If you remove distraction, replace it with meaningful activity. If you stop complaining, replace it with problem solving. If you stop comparing, replace it with measuring your own progress. If you stop procrastinating, replace vague intentions with specific actions. If you stop seeking approval, replace it with values. This is how behavior changes sustainably. You are not simply fighting an old habit. You are building a new life around a new identity, and the new identity needs evidence. Give it evidence. Today, tomorrow, next week, not perfection. Evidence. There will be days when you break the pattern. Don't turn one mistake into an identity. One bad meal isn't failure. One missed workout isn't failure. One distracted afternoon isn't failure. One poor decision isn't failure. The danger is the story afterward. I always do this. I never change. See? I knew I couldn't. That story turns an event into an identity. Interrupt it. Say, I slipped. Then ask, what do I do next? That question is incredibly powerful. Not what happened, what next? Because life will constantly ask that question. You lose, what next? You fail, what next? You get rejected, what next? You succeed, what next? You become comfortable, what next? You reach the goal, what next? There is always another level, not because you are never enough, but because life continues. Growth is not a finish line. It is a way of relating to existence. Curious, intentional, humble, courageous. And when you live that way, luck becomes less important because your life is no longer waiting for a perfect event to validate you. You can find meaning in the process. You can find pride in keeping promises. You can find satisfaction in learning. You can find strength in recovery. You can find joy in progress. And that's when something beautiful happens. You stop chasing the feeling of being successful and start becoming successful in ways that cannot always be measured immediately. You become someone you respect. And there are few achievements more valuable than that, because you have to live with yourself every morning. You can fool other people. You can create an image. You can post the right words. You can look confident. But when the room gets quiet, you know whether you are keeping your promises. And that private knowledge shapes your confidence more than applause ever will. So build a private life you don't need to escape from. Build habits you can respect. Build relationships based on honesty. Build skills that create value. Build financial habits that create options. Build a mind that can tolerate discomfort. Build a body that supports your life. Build a character that remains when circumstances change. Then, when opportunity appears, you won't need to ask, am I lucky? You'll ask, am I ready? And if you're not ready, don't despair. Get ready. Learn, practice, prepare. Because readiness can be developed. That may be one of the most hopeful truths you will ever hear. You don't have to be ready today. You can become ready. You don't have to be confident today. You can become confident. You don't have to be disciplined today. You can practice discipline. You don't have to know everything. You can learn. You don't have to know the whole path. You can take the next step. You don't have to change your entire life tonight. You can change one decision. And one decision can change the direction, then another decision, then another. And eventually, without noticing exactly when it happened, you become somebody your younger self would barely recognize. Not because you became perfect, because you became deliberate. And maybe that is the deeper meaning of believing in yourself. It isn't believing that you are special. It is believing that you are capable of participation, capable of learning, capable of growth, capable of responsibility, capable of recovery, capable of becoming. And once you believe that, you stop waiting for someone to rescue your future. You start building it quickly, patiently, relentlessly. And there will be mornings when nobody notices. Good. Build anyway. There will be evenings when the results are invisible. Good. Learn anyway. There will be moments when doubt returns. Good. Listen to it, examine it, and then decide. There will be people who tell you you're wasting your time. Maybe they will be right about one strategy. Maybe they will be wrong about your capacity. You don't need to prove them wrong with words. Improve with action. Let time reveal what argument cannot. Let consistency speak. Let character speak. Let results speak. But don't make your life a courtroom where you spend every day trying to prove your worth to people who aren't living it. Your worth does not rise and fall with somebody else's opinion. Your responsibility is development. Your responsibility is to use what you have, to learn what you don't know, to repair what you damage, to strengthen what is weak, to protect what matters, to pursue what is meaningful. And when you fail, return to the work. That is where the real confidence comes from, not from a speech, not from a quote, not from a motivational video. A speech can awaken you, but you must walk. A quote can inspire you, but you must practice. A story can move you, but you must decide. No one can do that part for you. And that is not bad news. That is freedom. Because if the work belongs to you, so does the possibility. Maybe you have spent years waiting for luck, waiting for someone to notice, waiting for the right opportunity, waiting for confidence, waiting for motivation, waiting for circumstances to become easier. But perhaps the waiting itself has become the habit. Perhaps the most important change isn't finding a better opportunity. It's becoming the kind of person who creates opportunity from imperfect conditions. That person wakes up and asks, what can I do with what I have? Not, why don't I have more? They ask, what can I learn? Not, why don't I already know? They ask, who can I become? Not, why am I not already there? That shift changes the quality of your life because the first question creates agency. And agency creates movement. Movement creates experience. Experience creates competence. Competence creates confidence. Confidence creates courage. Courage creates opportunities. And opportunities create new possibilities. Look at that chain. It starts with a question, not luck. A question. What can I do with what I have? Ask it again tomorrow. Ask it when the circumstances aren't ideal. Ask it after rejection. Ask it when you're tired. Ask it when you're behind. Ask it when you're starting late. Because the answer may be small, but small is enough. One phone call, one page, one workout, one application, 1 hour, one conversation, one lesson, $1 saved, one distraction removed, one promise kept, and then another. The future doesn't demand that you become extraordinary overnight. It asks whether you are willing to become slightly better, slightly wiser, slightly stronger, slightly more courageous, repeatedly. And that is where the story becomes interesting. Because when you start doing that, you discover that the biggest obstacle wasn't always the world. Sometimes it was the story you had been telling yourself about the world. I can't. They won't. I'm unlucky. I'm too late. I don't have enough. I don't know enough. I'm not confident. And maybe some of those statements contain facts. Maybe you don't have enough yet. Maybe you don't know enough yet. Maybe you are starting later than someone else, but yet changes the relationship. It transforms a verdict into a process, and processes can be worked. You can work with what you have. You can learn. You can adapt. You can improve. You can become. So don't ask life to guarantee you success. Ask yourself to become worthy of the responsibility of pursuing it. And if you fail, become wiser. If you win, become humbler. If you lose, become stronger. If you are delayed, become patient. If you are afraid, become courageous. If you are uncertain, become curious. If you are tired, learn the difference between rest and quitting. If you are criticized, separate useful feedback from noise. If you are praised, remain teachable. If you are alone, use the solitude. If you are surrounded, choose your influences carefully. Every circumstance contains something to work with. Not always something easy, but something. And once you start seeing life that way, you become difficult to defeat. Not because nothing hurts you, because everything teaches you. That is a different kind of resilience. The world throws an obstacle. You ask, what can this teach me? The world closes a door. You ask, what does this redirect me toward? The world says no. You ask, what needs to improve? The world gives you uncertainty. You ask, what can I control? The world gives you time. You ask, what will I build with it? That is how a growth mindset becomes more than a phrase. It becomes a way of living. And now perhaps you can see why I don't want you to simply stop believing in luck. I want you to stop using luck as an explanation for the parts of your life where you still have influence. There is a difference. If something truly is outside your control, accept it. But where you have influence, exercise it. Where you have choice, choose where you have learning available. Learn where you have preparation available. Prepare where you have an opportunity to practice courage. Practice it. And where you have made a mistake, don't waste the mistake. Extract the lesson. Because one of the most expensive things a human being can do is suffer without learning. Pain is already expensive. At least take wisdom from it. Let your failures pay tuition. Let your mistakes become teachers. Let your rejection sharpen your strategy. Let your uncertainty develop your patience. Let your discipline create your freedom. Let your courage create your confidence. And let your confidence create a willingness to attempt what once frightened you. Then one day, somebody may look at you and say, you were lucky. And you may realize they are only seeing the final page. They don't know about the Fool of the Rich. They don't know about the mornings. They don't know about the doubts. They don't know about the years you spent learning. They don't know about the sacrifices. They don't know about the failures. They don't know about the days when you wanted to quit. They don't know about the small decision that changed the direction. And you don't need them to know, because you know what it cost to become the person standing there. And perhaps the most beautiful part is that the person standing there isn't finished. There is still more to learn, more to build, more to become, more courage to develop, more wisdom to earn, more people to serve, more mistakes to make, more lessons to discover, more opportunities to recognize. Because believing in yourself doesn't mean believing you've arrived. It means believing you are still capable of becoming, and that belief can carry you through seasons when external evidence is scarce. When the numbers aren't impressive, when nobody is clapping, when the results are delayed, when the future feels uncertain, you can say, I don't see it yet, but I am building. I don't understand it yet, but I am learning. I'm not confident yet, but I am practicing. I'm not where I want to be yet, but I am moving. That word again, yet, a small word, a powerful word, because it leaves the door open. And sometimes your entire future is standing behind a door you haven't opened because you assumed it was locked. Maybe it isn't locked. Maybe you just haven't pushed. Maybe the next attempt isn't the one that succeeds. Maybe the next conversation isn't the one that changes everything. Maybe the next morning isn't magical. That's okay. You don't need magic. You need movement. And movement creates information. Information creates adjustment. Adjustment creates progress. Progress creates evidence. Evidence creates belief. And belief, when grounded in action, creates something stronger than luck. It creates self-trust. That is what I want you to build. Not an ego that says, I'm better than everyone. A foundation that says, I know I can face myself. I know I can learn. I know I can recover. I know I can keep my word. I know I can take another step. And when you can trust yourself, you walk differently. You speak differently. You choose differently. You tolerate less nonsense. You accept more responsibility. You stop waiting for permission. You become more patient because you know you're building. You become less desperate because you trust your ability to continue. You become less controlled by immediate outcomes. And that is when your relationship with success changes. Success becomes less about proving something and more about expressing something. Your potential, your values, your discipline, your creativity, your service, your courage, your character. And perhaps the person who needed to hear this most isn't the person who thinks they're incapable. Perhaps it's the person who has been waiting for a sign, waiting for someone to say, now. Maybe this is your reminder that there will never be a perfect moment. There will always be uncertainty. There will always be reasons to wait. There will always be somebody more experienced. There will always be somebody richer. There will always be somebody younger. There will always be somebody ahead. Let them be ahead. Your job is not to control their timeline. Your job is to live yours deliberately. And if you're behind, start where you are. If you're tired, rest and return. If you're afraid, take the smallest courageous step. If you're confused, learn. If you've failed, reflect. If you've wasted time, stop wasting more. If you don't believe in yourself yet, begin with a promise so small you can keep it, then another, then another. Because eventually the voice inside you will change. And when that voice changes, the world you experience begins to change with it. Not because reality became magical, because you became different in reality. You notice different opportunities. You make different choices. You enter different rooms. You speak to different people. You develop different skills. You tolerate different standards. You create different results. And suddenly, what once looked like luck begins to look like preparation. What once looked like confidence begins to look like practiced courage. What once looked like success begins to look like accumulated decisions. What once looked like talent begins to look like years of deliberate work. And what once looked impossible begins to look like a long series of small steps. That is the revelation. Not that luck never matters, but that you have more influence than you have been using. And perhaps that is why this moment matters. Not because a speech can change your life. A speech cannot do your work. But a realization can change a decision. A decision can change a habit. A habit can change an identity. An identity can change a life. So protect the realization. Don't let tomorrow's distractions bury tonight's clarity. You don't need to become a completely different person tomorrow morning. Just prove one thing to yourself. That you can act on what you say matters. One promise, one action, one beginning. Then protect it. Because once you experience what it feels like to keep a promise to yourself, something begins to rebuild self-respect. And self-respect creates a different kind of confidence. Quick, stable, earned. The kind that doesn't disappear when someone criticizes you. The kind that doesn't collapse after one failure. The kind that doesn't need to tell everybody how strong it is. The kind that simply keeps moving. And perhaps that's where you are headed. Not toward a life without difficulty, toward a life in which difficulty no longer automatically controls you. Not toward guaranteed success, toward greater capacity. Not toward perfect confidence, toward deeper self-trust. Not toward a world that always favors you, toward a person who can respond when it doesn't. And there will be moments when you still wonder whether you're lucky. That's human. When the opportunity disappears, when someone else gets chosen, when your work isn't recognized, when the numbers are disappointing, when you lose, when the timing is wrong. In those moments, don't lie to yourself. Acknowledge the disappointment. Then ask the question that keeps you moving. What is still mine to control? Maybe it's preparation. Maybe it's learning. Maybe it's patience. Maybe it's another attempt. Maybe it's a completely different direction. Maybe it's simply taking care of yourself so you can return stronger. You don't always need a dramatic answer. Sometimes the answer is simply continue. But continue intelligently. Continue consciously. Continue with your eyes open. And if you need to change direction, change. Your identity is not your strategy. Your values can remain while your method changes. That's wisdom. And as you become wiser, you'll discover that success isn't a straight climb. There are times you accelerate. Times you retreat. Times you pause. Times you rebuild. Times you question. Times you discover. And through all of it, one question remains. Who am I becoming? That question is more important than, am I winning today? Because today's score can change. Your character is being built underneath the score. And if you build character, you can rebuild results. If you build results without character, results may eventually rebuild you in painful ways. So build underneath. Build the foundation. Build the mind. Build the habits. Build the skills. Build the emotional strength. Build the patience. Build the courage. Build the ability to begin again. Then let the outside results take the time they take. This is not passive. It is deeply active. You are working, but you're working on the person who performs the work. And when the person improves, the work improves. When the work improves, the results improve. When the results improve, opportunities expand. And when opportunities expand, your choices expand. That's how freedom grows. Not overnight, through capacity. And capacity is built every day, every choice. Every repetition, every uncomfortable moment you refuse to waste. So don't believe in luck as an excuse. Believe in preparation. Don't believe in luck as your identity. Believe in growth. Don't believe that someone else holds the keys to your future. Believe that you have a role in creating it. Don't believe that confidence arrives before action. Believe that action can build confidence. Don't believe that failure is a final verdict. Believe that failure can become information. Don't believe that your current self is your permanent self. Believe that you can develop. And when you don't feel that belief strongly enough, act first. Sometimes belief follows behavior. You keep one promise, then another. You take one risk, then another. You learn one skill, then another. You recover once, then again. And eventually you stop saying, I hope I can. You begin saying, I know I can handle the next step. Not the whole mountain, the next step, then the next. And maybe the mountain is still enormous. Good. Let it be enormous. You don't climb a mountain by staring at the summit all day. You place your foot where your foot can go. Then again, then again. You breathe, you adjust, you keep moving, and sometimes you look up and realize you have climbed farther than you thought. That's what happens when you stop measuring your life only by how far you have left to go. Look at how far you've already come. Look at what you survived. Look at what you learned. Look at the things you once thought you could never handle. You handled them, maybe imperfectly. but you did. There is evidence already inside your life that you are more capable than some of your fears suggest. Use that evidence not to become complacent, to become courageous. Because if you've survived difficult chapters before, you can learn from them. And if you've never faced certain challenges, you can prepare. Either way, you can grow. And perhaps the next chapter of your life will not begin with some enormous stroke of luck. Perhaps it will begin quietly, with you waking up and deciding that your attention belongs to you, with you making one promise and keeping it, with you learning something instead of complaining, with you applying instead of hesitating, with you exercising instead of postponing, with you saving instead of spending impulsively, with you speaking instead of hiding, with you forgiving instead of carrying resentment, with you beginning, and nobody may notice. That's okay. The seed doesn't need applause. It needs water. The foundation doesn't need compliments. It needs strength. The person you're becoming doesn't need an audience every day. They need consistency. And if you can give yourself that consistency, something begins to happen that is difficult to see from the outside. You become less dependent on luck, not because luck disappeared, because you became more capable of creating value under many different circumstances. That's power. And there is still another layer beneath even that, because eventually you may discover that believing in yourself is not about convincing yourself that you are extraordinary. It is about refusing to abandon your potential simply because its development is inconvenient. That is different. Potential is not a trophy. It is a responsibility. If you have a gift, develop it. If you have a weakness, strengthen it. If you have an opportunity, use it. If you have time, invest it. If you have influence, use it wisely. If you have made mistakes, learn. If you have been given another morning, don't treat it casually, because another morning is not guaranteed. And the older you get, the more clearly you understand that time was never the background of life. Time was the material. You were building with it every day. And what you build becomes your life. So be careful what you build accidentally. Be intentional. And perhaps tonight, instead of asking, am I lucky? Ask, what am I becoming? Instead of asking, why don't I have their opportunity? Ask, how can I become ready for mine? Instead of asking, why am I not confident? Ask, what evidence can I create today that I can trust myself? Instead of asking, why do I keep failing? Ask, what is this failure trying to teach me? Instead of asking, when will my life change? Ask, what can I change now? Because that is where your power begins, not someday. Not when everything is perfect. Now and tomorrow, again. And when tomorrow becomes today, again. And when you fall, again. And when you rise, again. Because maybe the greatest secret isn't that successful people got lucky. Maybe it is that they became the kind of people who kept preparing while everyone else was waiting for luck. Maybe they learned to see possibility where others saw inconvenience. Maybe they learned to see lessons where others saw humiliation. Maybe they learned to see practice where others saw repetition. Maybe they learned to see responsibility where others saw blame. Maybe they learned to see time as an asset where others saw it as something to kill. And maybe you can learn that too, not instantly, but gradually. And perhaps the most important thing is that you don't need to become fearless before you begin. You need to become willing to be uncomfortable, willing to be a beginner, willing to look foolish, willing to fail, willing to learn, willing to change, willing to disappoint people, willing to outgrow old habits, willing to wait, willing to work, willing to start again. Because willingness is the doorway. And once you walk through it, you begin discovering parts of yourself that fear had hidden. You discover patience. You discover courage. You discover creativity. You discover resilience. You discover discipline. You discover that you can survive uncertainty You discover that you can learn things that once intimidated you. And perhaps one day you will face another impossible looking situation. And instead of saying, I'm unlucky, you'll pause, you'll breathe, you'll look at what is actually in front of you. And you'll ask, what can I do? And that question will open another door. Then you'll ask, what don't I know? Another door. What can I learn? Another. Who can help me? Another. What is the next step? Another. Can I take it? And maybe you're still afraid. Take it afraid. Maybe you're still uncertain. Take it uncertain. Maybe you're still not confident. Take it anyway. Because confidence often lives on the other side of the action you are avoiding. And there is something else on the other side too. Evidence. Evidence that you can move. Evidence that you can learn. Evidence that you can recover. Evidence that you can become. And once you have enough evidence, the old voice begins losing its authority. The voice that says, you can't. You answer with experience. The voice that says, you're unlucky. You answer with preparation. The voice that says, you're too late. You answer with action. The voice that says, everyone else is ahead. You answer by looking forward. The voice that says, what if you fail? You answer, then I will learn what the failure has to teach me. And then there is a deeper question. What if you succeed? What if you actually become the person you have been afraid to become? What if your life gets bigger? What if people begin expecting more from you? What if your choices begin affecting other people? What if you have more responsibility? What if you have more influence? What if you finally have the resources you once prayed for? Are you preparing for that person too? Because believing in yourself isn't only preparing you to survive hardship. It is preparing you to carry possibility. And perhaps that is why the work matters now. The person who can carry the future must be built before the future arrives. So build quietly, guidedly, consistently. And when the world tells you to wait for luck, remember that preparation has its own kind of timing. When the world tells you to compare, remember that your path is not a race against another person's calendar. When the world tells you to quit because the results are slow, remember that some of the most important transformations are invisible before they become undeniable. When your mind tells you that you are not enough, don't argue with it for hours. Give yourself evidence, do the work, learn, practice, return. And when you make progress, don't immediately move the goalpost so far away that you never experience satisfaction. Pause, recognize, be grateful, then continue, because gratitude and ambition can coexist. You can appreciate where you are without deciding to remain there. You can love yourself and still demand more from yourself. You can accept yourself and still improve yourself. You can be proud of your progress and hungry for growth. Those aren't contradictions. That's maturity. And perhaps that's the mindset that will carry you through the years ahead. Not blind optimism, not pessimism, grounded possibility, the belief that reality may be difficult. And you can still develop that circumstances may be unfair. And you can still act that luck may influence outcomes. And you can still prepare that failure may happen. And you can still learn that fear may appear. And you can still move. That time will pass. And you can decide what it compounds into. And if you understand that, then maybe you stop asking life to make you feel confident. You start building a life that gives you reasons to trust yourself. That's where confidence becomes real. And perhaps tomorrow morning, when you stand up, nothing around you will look different. Same room, same problems, same responsibilities, same world. But you can be different inside that room. You can wake up with a different question. Not what do I feel like doing, but what matters? Not what if I fail, but what can I learn? Not am I lucky, but how can I prepare? Not why am I behind, but what is my next step? And that next step may look ordinary, almost disappointingly ordinary. But don't underestimate ordinary actions. Ordinary actions repeated with extraordinary consistency create extraordinary lives. And maybe that is why the person you become tomorrow will not be created tomorrow. They are being created now, in this decision, in this attention, in this willingness, in this refusal to surrender your future to a word as convenient as luck. Because luck can explain an event. It should never become an excuse for a life. And there may be things you cannot change. Accept them. There may be things you cannot control. Release them. But there are things you can build. Build them. There are things you can learn. Learn them. There are things you can practice. Practice them. There are people you can serve. Vet them. There are promises you can keep. Keep them. There are risks you can take. Take them carefully. There are mistakes you can repair. Repair them. There are dreams you can begin. Begin them. And when the first attempt doesn't work, don't immediately ask whether you were meant to do it. Ask what the attempt revealed. Maybe the market is wrong. Maybe the skill needs improvement. Maybe the timing is wrong. Maybe the strategy needs changing. Maybe you need help. Maybe you need patience. Maybe the dream needs to evolve. You are allowed to adjust. You are allowed to learn. You are allowed to become wiser than the person who made the original plan. That is not weakness. That's growth. And the more you grow, the less interested you become in proving a fixed identity. You don't have to be the successful person. You can simply be a person committed to growth. Then success becomes a consequence rather than a costume. And when success comes, you can handle it. When failure comes, you can handle it. When uncertainty comes, you can handle it. When opportunity comes, you can recognize it. That is the real victory, not controlling the entire world. Becoming capable of meeting the world. And maybe somewhere ahead, there will be a moment when you look back at this period. You'll remember how uncertain you felt, how afraid you were, how much you didn't know, how many times you questioned yourself. And you'll realize that the person you were waiting for was being built in those very moments, not after the fear, during it, not after the uncertainty, inside it, not after the failure. Because of what you learned from it, and then you may understand something that is difficult to see from the beginning. You didn't need luck to become the person you wanted to be. You needed the willingness to keep becoming. And that process has no neat finish line because there is always another skill, another challenge, another level of responsibility, another opportunity to practice courage, another place where your old thinking can be replaced with wiser thinking, another place where you can choose discipline over impulse, another place where you can choose patience over panic, another place where you can choose growth over comfort. And perhaps tomorrow, the challenge will be different. Maybe it won't be fear of failure. Maybe it will be fear of success. Maybe it won't be learning how to begin. Maybe it will be learning how to continue. Maybe it won't be building confidence. Maybe it will be learning how to remain humble once confidence becomes natural. Maybe it won't be escaping distraction. Maybe it will be deciding what deserves your attention when opportunities begin multiplying. Maybe it won't be proving that you can work hard. Maybe it will be learning when to rest. Maybe it won't be learning how to dream. Maybe it will be learning how to choose between several dreams. And that is why the journey keeps getting deeper, because every answer changes the question. Every level of growth reveals another level of responsibility. Every new capability creates new choices. Every new choice reveals something about character. And perhaps that is where the real work begins. Not in becoming someone who never doubts himself, but in becoming someone who knows how to move even when doubt is present. Someone who doesn't need the world to guarantee the outcome before taking responsibility for the next decision. Someone who can stand in uncertainty without immediately calling it bad luck. Someone who can look at an unopened door, a difficult season, a failed attempt, a delayed dream, and instead of asking only why life has not given them what they wanted, quietly begin asking what they can build with what is already in their hands. Because once you start asking that question honestly, you may discover that you have been holding more than you realized, more time than you thought, more ability than you trusted, more choices than you noticed, more strength than your past allowed you to believe, and perhaps most importantly, more responsibility for what comes next than you ever imagined. And that is where the next question begins.